Alright, your trained circular 9237 operator circular welding theory application reporting errors recommended improvements May 1923. Distribution public release distribution is unlimited. All right, safety precautions, safety chapter 2, safety precautions, welding operations, section 1, general safety precautions, general. To prevent injury, personal extreme caution should be exercised using any type of welding equipment. Injury can result in fire, explosion, electrical shot, harmful agents. Both general specific safety precautions listed below must be strictly observed by workers and who weld and cut metals. Do not permit unauthorized person to weld with the cutting equipment. Do not weld and building on the wooden floors unless the floors are protected with a hot metal, the means of the fire-resistant fabric, sand, or fireproof material. Be sure that hot sparks or hot metal will not fall on the operator or any of the welding equipment components. Remove all the flammable materials such as cotton, oil, gasoline, etc. from the vicinity of the welding. Before welding and cutting, warm those close proximity that are not protected with the wear proper clothing and goggles. Remove the as assembled with the component being welded that may come with a warped or otherwise damaged with the welding process. Do not leave hot rejected electrical stubs, steel scrap, and tools on the floor around the welding equipment. Accident or fires may occur. Keep a suitable fire extinguisher nearby at all times. You ensure the fire extinguisher is operable condition. Mark all hot metal after welding operation is complete. Soapstone is commonly used for this purpose. 2. Personal protective equipment. General. The electric arc is a very powerful source of light. Includes visible ultraviolet and infrared. Protective clothing and equipment must be worn during all hot welding operation. During all acetylene welding and cutting process, operators must be safety goggles to protect the eyes from heat, glare, and flying fragments of hot metals. During all electrical welding process, operators must use safety goggles and a hand shield. Helmet equipped with a suitable filter glass to protect against the intense ultraviolet infrared rays. Where other vicinities of electric welding process of the arcs must be screened. The arc cannot be seen either directly by reflecting a glass of metal. Helmets and shield. Welding arcs are intensely bright light that contain a proportion of the ultraviolet which may cover the eye damage. For the reason the arc should never be viewed with the naked eye for the distance of 50 feet. The brilliance of the electric exact spectrum, therefore, the danger of light depends on the welding process of the metal arc and the arc atmosphere and the length of the arc and the welding current. Operator filters with the work by nearby and protection against arc radiation. The intensity of the light over the arc increases with the increasing of the volt current and the arc voltage. Arc radiation, like all radiation, decreases with the square of the distance. The process of the product of the smoke surrounding the arc having a less bright arc smoke. Since smoke acts as a filter, the spectrum of the welding arc is similar to that of the sun. Exposure to the skin and the eyes arc is same as exposure to the sun. Alright, 2. Being closeted. While there's need a helmet to protect his eyes from harm light, particular hot metal of the welding helmet. Figure 2.1. Generally constructed with the pressed fiber insulation material with an adjustable headband, made for the usable the person with a different head side with a minimized reflection glare produces an intense light helmet with a dark black color, infit for the overhead that can be swung upon the not welded when not welding. The chief advantage of the helmet is leaves both hands free and making it possible to hold the work and the weld at the same time. Figure 2.1 shows the welding helmet and a handheld shield. The handheld shield, figure 2.1, provides the same protection as the helmet, but in a held position with a handle. Type of the shield is frequently used by an observer or the person who welds for a short period of time. The protective welding helmet, the lens of the holders, or even the insert of the covered glass of the filter glass and plate with the standard side of the filter plate is 2x4 by a quarter inch. And some of the helmets can lenses holders open and flip upward. Lenses designed to prevent flash burn, eye damage, absorption, infrared, ultraviolet height rays produce the arc on the filter glass of the plates can come with various optical densities. Filter out various light intensities depending on the welding and the process type of the base and the welding current. The color of the lens, usually green, blue, brown, adding protective against the intensity of the white light over the glare. The colored lens makes it possible to clearly see the metal in the weld. Table 2.1. Those proper filter shades to be used with a magnifier lens placed behind the filter glass sometimes used to provide clear vision. This shows your lens shades and the welding cutting. A cover plate should be placed on the outside of the filter over the glass to protect from the welding spatter. The filter glass should be temperature so that it will not break if hit by flying welding spatter. Filter glass is marked for showing the manufacturer's shade with the number letter H indicating that it has been treated for the impact resistance. Note, colored glass manufactured according to the specification detailed in the ANSI safety code for the protection of the hand, eyes of the industrial worker with the National Bureau of Standard, Washington, D.C. is your OSHA standard, subpart Q, welding and cutting using paragraph 10, 1910, 252, and American National Standards of the Z87-1, 1968, American National Standard Practice, Occupation, Educational Eye and Face Protection. Gas metal arc welding requires a darker filter lens and shield. Metal arc welding. The intensity of the ultraviolet radiation emanating during gas metal arc welding ranges 50 to 30 times brighter than welding covered in electrodes. Do not weld the cracked and defective shield because of the penetrating ray of the arc may cause serious burns. Be sure to the colored glasses plates over the proper shade of the arc welding. Proper glass plate with the molten metal. Spatter using covered glass. Replace the covered glass with a damaged spot with a molten matter spatter. 7. Face shields figure 2 must also be worn to protect the protected eyes. Welders must have safety glasses. Chippers and grinders often use face shield in addition with the safety glasses. Clear face shield helmet with respirator. In some welding operations, use of mask type respirators require the helmets with the bubble design can be adopted with the use of the respirators. Our safety goggles. During all electrical welding operation process, the operator must wear safety goggles to protect the eyes from the weld spatter. Occasionally gets inside of the helmet. The clear goggles to protect the eyes from the slag particle with the shifting of the hot spark with the grinding contact lenses should not be worn with the welding or working around welders. Tinted safety glasses and side shields are recommended, especially for the welders shifting grind with the working around the welders should also be tinted safety glasses with side shields. This shows the chipper's glasses, GC and GC2 model. Protective clothing. Personal exposed with the hazard created with the welding, cutting, the brazing operation should be protected with the personal protective equipment according to the OSHA standards subpart I1, personal protective equipment, paragraph 1910-132. The appropriate protective clothing required with any of the welding operation varies size, nature, location, work. To perform welders should wear work and shop clothes without opening the gap to prevent arc rays obtaining the skin of the work closing of the arc weld. Should also be wear with the protective clothing. Clothing should also always be kept dry, include gloves. Should have leather apron, sleeves, leg apron, coat and cape and bib and glove. Welding clothing, woolen clothing should be worn instead of the cotton since wool is not easily burned. Damaged weld spatter helps protect the welder from exchanging the temperature. Cotton clothing, if used, should be chemically treated to reduce its combustibility. All other clothing should be, such as jumpers, overalls, should be responsibly free of oil and grease. Flammable proof aprons and jackets made of leather and fire-resistant material. Other suitable materials should be worn with the protection against spatter for the molten metal, radiated heat, and sparks. Capes and shoulders cover the maid with lead. The other suitable materials should be worn during the overhead welding cutting operation. Leather skull caps may be worn under the helmet to prevent head burns. Sparks may be lodged in rolled up sleeve in the pocket of clothing. Cut off cuffs of overalls, trousers, therefore sleeves and colors should be kept buttoned and provocative. This should be eliminated with the front of the overalls and aprons. Trousers, overalls shall not be turned up on the outside. Heavy work with the fire-resistant leggings, high boots, or the equivalent means should be used for the protection work against the sheet metal screen in front of the work legs and provide with the further protection against the spark molten metal cutting operation. Flame-proof gauntlet gloves, preferably leather, should be worn to protect the head from the arms of the rays of the arc. Molten metal sparks on spot. Hot metal. Leather gloves should be sufficient thick so that they will not shrivel from the heat, burn through, wear out quickly. Leather gloves should not be used to pick up hot items since for the cause of the leather to become stiff and crack. Do not allow oil and grease to come in contact with the gloves as it will reduce the flame resistant cause for the readily ignited charge. Alright, warning, where this exposure sharp, heavy, the falling object with a hazard bumping in confined spaces, hard hats and hard head protectors must be used with welding, cutting overhead confined spaces, steel-toed boots, air protection must also be wear. When welding an area, operations should be adequately screened with the protected nearby worker, the passer for the other glare. The welding screen should be arranged with no serious restriction ventilation exists. Screens are to be mounted so they are about 2 feet above the floor unless the work is performed at such a low level. The screen must be extended closer to the floor, protecting the adjacent worker. The height of the screen is normally 6 feet, but may be higher depending on the situation. Screening surrounding around must be painted special paints absorbent and ultraviolet radiation. Do not create with the highest contrast between bright and dark areas, light pastel colors. Zinc and the titanium dioxide base paint with the recommended with the black paint should not be used. Alright, fire hazard. Fire prevention protection responsibly weld with the cutter supervisor. Approximately 6% of the fire with industrial paint are caused by cutting and welding that has been done primarily with a portable equipment or an area is not specifically designated for such work. The elaboration basic precautions to be taken with the fire prevention during welding and cutting is the standard fire prevention and using cutting weld. The process National Fire Protection Association Standard 51B 1962. Some of the basic precaution fire prevention welding cutting work are given below. During welding cutting operations, sparks and molten spatter of the form over the sometime with fly about considerable distances. Sparks are falling through the cracks, pipe holes, or small opening in floors, partially starting fires in other areas where the temporarily may get unnoticed. For these reasons, welding and cutting should not be done with the near flammable materials unless every precaution is taken to prevent ignition. Hot pieces of the base metal, when they come into contact with the combustible material, start with a fire explosion, has been caused by the heat with the transmitted through the walls containing flame in the atmosphere. Combustible within containers. Anything that is combustible to flammable is susceptible to ignition by cutting in the welding. When welding, cutting the parts of the vehicle, oil pan, gas tanks, or other parts of the vehicle are considered fire hazards must be removed or effectively shielded from sparks and slag and molten metal. Whenever possible, flammable flexible material attached with the near equivalent requirement of welding, brazing, cutting will remove the removal of the not practical with a suitable shield with a heating resistant material that should be used to protect the flammable material. Fire extinguisher equipment at any type of the fire of the baby and coward must be present. Alright, 2-4, health protection, ventilation, general. All welding, thermal cutting operation carried with a confined space that may be adequately ventilated to prevent accumulation of toxic material, combustible material, gases. Possible oxygen deficiency monitoring instruments should be used to detect with a harmful atmosphere and possible to provide adequate ventilation. Air supply respirators, hose markers approved for this purpose must be used in situations. Lockouts must be used outside of the confined space to ensure the safety of the working within. Requirements of this section have been established for the arc gas cutting and the requirements for the governor amount with the contamination of which the welder was exposed. To mention the air welding process to take place with a special regard for the height of the ceiling, number of the welders in the room, possibly weld metal hazard fumes, gases, dust, according to the metals involved. Location of the welder's breathing zone, the respective rising plume of the fuse. Alright, in specific cases, all the infections involved with the respirator protective devices, ventilation should be provided with the equivalent requirements for the section. This include atmospheric conditioning, general heating with generated heat, presence, volatile solvents. In all cases, required health protection ventilation standards, standard operating procedures for new old welding operations should be coordinated and clean with a safety inspector, industrial hygiene, having responsibility, safety, health protection aspects of the work area. Are your screen areas when the welding performs space and entry with the screen? All of the side of the screens may be arranged with no serious restriction. Ventilation is desirable to have screens mounted so that they are 2 feet above the floor within less of the workers to perform low level of screen with extent with the close of the floor to protect the worker from glare of the weld. Concentration, toxic substance, local exhaust generation, ventilation system provide the range to keep the amount of the toxic-free gas and dust below. Subtle concentration, American National Institute standards at 737. Latest list of threshold limited values in the American Conference of Governmental Industrial Hygiene Exposure Limit exposed, established by Public Law 91-596 and the Occupational Safety Health Act of 1970. Compliance shall be determined with a sampling atmosphere sample collected that shall reflect the exposure of persons involved with a helmet worn sample that will be collected under the helmet. Note when welding operation incidental with the general operation for the concern of the good practice for the apply with local exhaust ventilation to prevent contamination of the general work area. Your respirator protective equipment, individual respirator protective equipment will be retained and respirator protective equipment attached approved with the U.S. Bureau of Minimized National Institute of Occupational Safety Health. Other government-approved testing agencies shall be utilized guidance, selection, area care, and maintenance of the respiratory protective equipment. As practice respiratory protection, American National Standards 788 2 and Technical Training Bulletin MED 2223. Respiratory protective equipment will be transferred from one individual to another without being disinfected. Alright, precaution label. The number of potential hazard label material used in flex coating, the covering of the filler metal of the metals used in the welding and cutting operation become hazards of the welder relief of the atmosphere. They include, but are not limited to the following material fluxing, fluorine compounds, zinc with lead, beryllium, cadmium, mercury. See paragraph 241 through N. The supplier's welding material should be determined hazard that is associated with the use of metals, materials, welding, cutting, etc. All filler metals, fusible granular materials shall be carried with the following notice of minimum tag in boxes and other containers. Caution: welding produces fumes and gas heavily to avoid breathing fumes and gases. Adequate ventilation. American National Standard Institute Z49-1 1973. Safety welding cutting published in American Welding Society. 2. Brazing. Welding fillers contain with a cadmium significant amount of them should carry the following notice on the tag and box and other containers. Warning: containing cadmium poses fumes may be formed by heating. Not breathe fumes only with adequate ventilation. Such fume ventilators, exhaust ventilators, air supplied respirators. American National Standard Institute Z49-1 1973. Chest pain, cough, and the fever fever develops after use. Call physician immediately. Alright, brazing and gas welding flux contained with the fluorine compound shall have the cautionary wording. One such wording recommended with the American Welding Society brazing gas and welding fluxes read as follows. Caution contains fluorides and flux heat with the given off fumes about to irritate nose and throat. Avoid fumes only when ventilated areas and spaces. Avoid contact with flux with the eye and skin. Do not take it internally. Ventilation, general welding and cutting. General mechanical ventilation should provide with welding and cutting either done on metals not covered in some paragraphs I through P with this section under the following conditions. In space less than 10,000 cubic feet of the per welder in road having a ceiling height of less than 16 feet. Confined space with the welding space to contain the partition balconies and structure barrier that extend with significantly obstruct the ventilation. Alright, 2. Minimum rate. Ventilation shall be mixed with the rate of 200 cubic feet per minute with the per welder, except with the lowest exhaust heat with the paragraph 2.4G with the below with the airline respirator. Approved with the U.S. Bureau of Mines and National Institute of Occupational Safety Health. Other governmental approved testing agency or use the welding rod larger than 3/16 of an inch in the diameter. Ventilation shall be higher as shown in the following. Should the rod diameter 1/4 inch at 3,500 ventilation cubic feet per minute, 3/8 of an inch at 4,500 cubic feet per minute ventilation. Natural ventilation is considered sufficient with a welding cutting operation, whether the conditions listed above are not present. Figure 2.5 illustration of the welding booth and the clip of the mechanical ventilation sufficient for one welder. Alright, figure 2.5 shows the welding booth with the mechanical ventilation, fresh air, and vent. Local exhaust ventilation. Mechanical local exhaust ventilation must be obtained either by the following means. Hoods. Free movable hoods of the ducts and same with the plate for the welder is near with the practical of working to be being welded. These welds provide the rate of the airflow sufficient to maintain the velocity in the direction of the hood at 100 linear feet per minute with the zone of the welding ventilation. Rates required to accomplish the control velocity of a 3-inch wide flange suction open under listed in the table 2.2. Table 2.2 show the required exhaust ventilation, the welding zone, the minimum airflow, cubic feet per minute, and the duct diameter in inches. Your fixed enclosure. Fixed enclosure with the top of the tube and war side with the surrounding with the welding cutting operation will have the rate of the airflow sufficient to maintain velocity away from the welder not less than 100 linear feet per minute. The draft ventilation table is required with 150 cubic feet per minute per square foot of the surface area. The rate of exhaust air should be uniform across the face of the grill. A low volume with a high density of fume with exhaust device attached to the welding and the gun collects the fumes as close as possible with the point of the origin of the arc. This is method of fume exhaust of the come quite popular with a semi-automatic process, particularly with flux core arc welding processes. Some exhaust systems incorporated with semi-automatic guns provide the most economical exhaust system since they exhaust much less air. They eliminate need of the massive air makeup used to provide heated air and cooled air to replace the air exhaust. Local ventilation should have the rate of the airflow sufficient to maintain velocity away from the welder, not less than 100 feet per minute. Air velocity measured using the velometer for the air filter inlet enter. The two systems can be extremely difficult when used when welding other than small weldments, downdrafting, welding work tables are popular in Europe, but they use a limited degree within North America. In all cases, local ventilation and exhaust air should be filtered. Ventilation confined spaces, air replacement. Ventilation is prerequisite with confined space. All of the welding cutting operation confined space with adequately to prevent the accumulation of the toxic material with all possible oxygen deficiency. Applies not only to the welder as a helper with the other person will immediately visit any airline respirator, then circumventing it is impossible to provide adequate ventilation for the confined area or line respirator hose mask. Approved U.S. Bureau of Mines National Institution of Occupation Safety and Health Government approved testing agency will be used for the purpose of the air should be meet the standard of the Public Law 91.596 Occupational Safety Act of 1970. Self-contained units of immediately hazard to life and hose mask with the blower and self-contained breathing equipment shall be used. The breathing equipment shall be approved by the U.S. Bureau of Mines, National Institute of Occupational Safety, Health, and other government-approved testing agencies. Outside helper with the operation for the carried out with the confined space for the welder and helpers provide with the hose mask for the blower and self-contained breathing equipment. Workers shall be stationed on the outside of such confined spaces to ensure the safety of those working within. Oxygen and ventilation. Oxygen must never be used for the ventilation. Fluorine compounds generally with a confined space welding, cutting involving flux coverings or other material. Fluorine compounds should be done in accordance with the paragraph 2.4 of the H of the ventilation in confined spaces. Fluorine compound is one of the containing fluorine. Fluorine is an element of the chemical combination, not a free gas. Our maximal allowable concentration of need for the local exhaust ventilation air respirator with welding, cutting, and other confined space, but depending on the individual circumstance and with experience, has shown that such protection is desired with the fire location production welding for all of the production welding in stainless steel. When air sample taken from the welding and the location indicated the fluorides liberated are below the maximal allowable concentration, such protection is not necessary. Or zinc, confined space for the confined space welding, cutting and dissolving zinc bearing filling metals and coated with the zinc bearing material should be done in accordance with paragraph 24H. Ventilation confined spaces, indoor welding and cutting involving zinc bearing metals and filler metals coated with the zinc bearing metals should be in accordance with the paragraph 24G. Alright, K, lead, confined space. In confined space involved with lead-based metal with the air is called lead burning should be done in accordance with the paragraph 24H. Indoors welding involved with lead-based metal should be done in accordance with the 204G local exhaust ventilation. Local ventilation confined space indoors welding cutting involved with the metals and contain leads and metals containing load-bearing materials include. Alright, paint should be done using the local exhaust ventilation and air respirators outside. Such operation done with the respirator protective equipment approved by the U.S. Bureau of Mines and National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health, other government approved testing agency. In all cases of the worker and immediately vicinity of the cutting and welding operation should partake with the necessary local exhaust ventilation air respirator. Or beryllium, welding and cutting indoors, outdoors, confined space involved with the beryllium bearing material with the filler metal using local exhaust ventilation air respirator must be performed without the exemption unless the atmospheric test done for the more adverse condition has established work exposure with acceptable concentration latest threshold limited values of the American Conference Governmental Industrial Hygienists or the exposure list of the established public law 9159-6 Occupational Safety Act of 1970. In all cases, the workers immediately the same with the welding cutting operation shall be protected with the necessary local exhaust ventilation airline respirators. Alright, cadmium. General welding, cutting indoors, confined space level involved with the cadmium and cadmium coated base metals with the weld done locally, exhaust ventilation, air respirators, outdoors, such that the operation should be done using respirator protective equipment, such as fused respirators approved by the U.S. Bureau of Mines, National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health, other government approved the testing agency for such purposes. Confined space. When welding, brazing involved with the cadmium bearing filler metal done with the ventilation prescribed in 24G and local exhaust ventilation 24H ventilation for the confined space if the work is done in confined space. No cadmium-free rods are available and can be used with more instances of the satisfactory result. Alright, and mercury. Welding, cutting indoor confined space involved with the coated with the mercury-bearing metals, including paint, should be done using local exhaust ventilation air line respirators. Outside operation will be done with the respirator protective equipment approved by the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health, U.S. Bureau of Mines, of the government approved the testing agency, cleaning compounds, manufacturer instruction, using cleaning metal materials because of the toxicity, flammability, appropriate precautions listed in manufacturer instruction will be followed. Or degreasing. Degreasing other cleaning operation involving the chlorinated hydrocarbons located with the no vapor operated with the reach for the drawing with any other surrounding any welding operation. In addition, with the trichloroethylene, perchloroethylene should be kept with the atmosphere. Penetrate with the ultraviolet radiation gas shield welding operation. Cutting in the stainless steel open cutting using either the chemical flux or the iron powder gas shield arc cutting. Stainless steel will be done using mechanical ventilation adequate to remove the fumes generated. First aid equipment. The first aid equipment will be available at all times on every shift of the welding operation. Personnel present who are trained with the render of first aid. All injuries will be reported as soon as possible. The medical attention first aid will be rendered only until medical attention can be approved. Alright, 2.5. Welding in confined spaces. A confined space is intended to mean with a relatively small restricted space, which is the tank of the boiler pressure vessel, small compartment that ship the tank of the welding, cutting of the performed with the confined space of the gas cylinder welding machine should be left on the outside before operations started. Heavy portable equipment mounted with the wheels securely blocked and prevent accidental movement. When the welder must enter with the confined space of the manhole, other opening of this means for the production, provide quickly remove it in the case of the emergency, the safety belts and lifelines used for the purpose of the attachment of the welder's body so that they cannot be jammed in the small existing opening. Exit open. Attending with the pre-planned rescue procedure stationed outside of the division of the welder at all times, capable of reporting rescue operations in effect. Alright, when arc welding is suspended with the sustained period of time during the lunch overnight, the lecturer is removed with the electrode holder carefully with the locate with the axe and contact cannot occur if the welding machine will be disconnected from the power source. In order to eliminate the possibility of gas escaping through the leaking and then properly close valves, gas cutting, and enable the gas oxygen supply will be closed with the regulator. Relief of the gas oxygen bleed valves and torch shut off with the equipment and not even in a substantial period of time practical with the torch and hose will also be removed in the confined space after the welding operation is completed. The welder will mark the hot metal with a provide with some other warning other structures. Alright, Section 2, Safety Precautions, Oxy-Fuel Welding. General additional information listed in Section 1 of the chapter following safety precaution must be observed. Do not experiment with the torch regulators in any way that do not use the oxygen regulators with acetylene cylinders. Do not use the lubricants of the regulator tank. Always protect the tank's hips and nozzle. Operate with the proper pressure for the particular work involved. With the information should be taken from the worksheet or table supplied with equipment. When not used, make sure the torch is not burning. Always also release the regulators. Bleed the hoses. Tightly close the valve. Do not hang on the torch while the hose is on the regulator. Cylinder valve. Do not hang with the torch from the match for the hot metal. Confined space explosive with a mixture of acetylene and oxygen might cover the personal injury, property damage. When they ignite the fiction lighter with the stationary pilot lights, when working in the confined space, provide adequate ventilation to dissipation of explosive gas that may be general ventilation standard with the paragraph 2.4. Health protection ventilation may be clear of the spaces between cylinder. Work on the cylinder valves can be reached easily and quickly. Use cylinders in order to receive it such with the fully empty cylinder. Separate mark with the empty one with the empty. Compressed gas cylinders are owned by the commercial company but will not be paying regulation Army. All of the drab. Never use cylinders, rollers, support, or any other purpose than that for which they are intended. Always wear protective clothing suitable for the welding and flame and cutting. Keep the work area clean and free and hazard material for flame and cutting spark can travel to 30 to 40, 50, 30 to 40 feet. Do not allow flare, cut, sparks to hit and hose, regulators, or cylinders. Use oxygen and acetylene other than fuel gases. Other fuel gases with appropriate torches only for the purpose intended. Just treat the regulators with respect. Do not turn the valve with the handling you the force. Always use the following sequence techniques of the lighting of a torch. Open the cylinder valve. Open the oxycylinder cylinder valve. Open the acetylene torch for one turn. Screw the acetylene regulator adjusting valve handle to the work pressure. Through the acetylene torch valve, this will purge the acetylene line. Slowly open the oxygen cylinder valve. Open the oxygen torch valve 1/4 turn. Screw the oxygen regulator screw into the working pressure. Turn off the oxygen torch valve. This will purge the oxygen line. Opening acetylene torch valve 1/4 turn and light the lighter. No, use only friction type lighter, especially provided with a lighting device. Open oxygen torch valve 1/4 turn. Just neutral flame. Always use the following sequence techniques for the shutting off the torch. Clean the acetylene torch valve with the first and the oxygen valve with the close the acetylene cylinder valve. Then the oxygen cylinder valve. The torch acetylene oxygen valve will release the pressure and regulator hose. Back off the regulator adjusting valve handling no spring tension is left. Close the torch valve. Use mechanical exhaust at the point of the welding cutting leads, cadmium, chromium, magnesium, braze, brown, zinc, and galvanized steel. Alright, do not weld the flame cut containers that have held combustibles without taking the special precaution. Not weld the flame cut seal containers compartment without providing venting of the special precaution. Not weld the cut confined space without taking special precautions. Acetylene cylinders, 2.7. Store caution. Acetylene cylinders have been stored with the transporter horizontally on their side. Cylinders vertical operate with 45 minutes prior to before the use. Always refer to the acetylene in the first name, but not the word gas alone. Acetylene very different from the city of the furnace gas. Acetylene is compound for the carbon with hydrogen producing reaction with water, calcium carbonide. Acetylene cylinders must be handled with avoid damage to the valve with a safety fuse plug. Cylinders must be stored upright with a well-ventilated, well-protected dry location at least 20 feet with a high combustible material such as oil paint exclusion. Valve protection caps must always be in place with a hand tight, except when the cylinders are in use. Do not store cylinders near the radiators, furnaces, any other above normal temperatures, tropical climates. Care must be taken out to store acetylene in areas if the temperature exceeds 137 degrees Fahrenheit. He will increase the pressure, which may cover the safety fuse plugs. The cylinder below storage areas should be located away from the elevators, gangways, and other places where the danger of the cylinders can be knocked over or damage falling objects. A suitable truck chain or strap must be used to prevent cylinders falling being knocked over. While in use, cylinders should be taken up within safety distance from the welding operation. There will be little possibility of sparks, hot flames reaching them. These should be kept away from the radiators, piping layout, cables, etc., which may be used for the grounding electrical circuits. Non-sparking tools should be used when the changing of the fitting of the cylinder and flammable gas. Never use acetylene with reducing the pressure with a suitable pressure reducing regulator. Never use acetylene pressure excess of 15 psi. Before attaching pressure regulators, open the acetylene cylinder valve on the instant blow dirt out of the nozzle. Wipe off the connection sheet with a cleaning cloth. Do not stand in the front of the valves when opening them. Outlet valves which have become clogged with ice should be thawed with warm water. Do not use scalding water or an open flame. Alright, be sure that the regulator tension screw for the release before opening the cylinder valve. Always open the valve slowly to avoid strain with the regulator gauge for the record that the cylinder pressure not open the valve more than 1.5 turns. Usually a half turn is sufficient. Always use the special T-wrench provided with the acetylene cylinder valve. Leave the wrench on the stem of the valve until the cylinder is in use so that the acetylene can be quickly turned off at emergency. Acetylene, highly combustible fuel gas, great care should be taken to keep the small sparks of the flames heat away from the cylinder. Never open the cylinder, the acetylene cylinder valve near other welding or cutting work. Never test the acetylene leak with open flame. Test all joints with the soapy water should be leaking a curve around the valve stem of the cylinder. Close the valve. Tighten the backing nut. Cylinder leaking around with the safety fuse plug should be taken outdoors away from all fires and sparks. Leave the valve open slightly to permit the contents to escape. And acetylene cylinders such as catch fire, they can usually extinguish with wet blanket. A burlap bag wet with calcium chloride solution is effective such for the emergency. Use a fail spray of stream water in cylinders to keep it cool. Never interchange acetylene regulator hose or other apparatus with a similar equipment intended for oxygen. Always you turn the acetylene cylinder of the valve outlet point away from the oxygen cylinder. When returning empty cylinders, set the valve for the close to prevent escape of the residual acetylene and acetone solvent screws on protective caps. Make sure that all gas apparatus are UL or FM approval installed properly in good working condition. Handle all compressed gas with extreme care. Keep cylinder gases caps when not in use. Make sure all compressed gas cylinders secured to the wall and other structural support. Keep acetylene cylinders with a vertical condition. Store compressed gas cylinders in a safe place with a good ventilation. Acetylene cylinders, oxygen cylinders should be kept apart. Never use acetylene pressure excess of 15 psi. High pressure can cause explosion. Acetylene is non-toxic, however, the anesthetic is present with a great enough the concentration of asphyxiation can produce suffocation. Alright, 2A oxygen cylinders. Always refer to the oxygen by its full name, not the word air alone. Oxygen should never be used for air in any way. Warning, oil, grease, and the presence of the oxygen ignite violently, especially within enclosed pressurized area. Oxygen cylinders should not be stored with a high combustible material, especially oil or grease, near reserve stock or carbide acetylene or other fuel gas cylinders. Any other substance likely to cause accelerate fire acetylene generator compartment. Oxygen cylinder stored with the outside of the generator house, separated from the generator carbide storage room. Non-combustible parts should have a resistant rating of at least 1 hour. The parts shall be without opening, shall be gas tight. Open cylinder storage shall be separated with the fuel gas cylinders, combustible materials, especially oil and grease. Minimum distance of 20 feet or by a non-combustible barrier at least 5 feet high, having a fire resistant rating of at least 1/2 hour. Liquid oxygen system is used to supply gaseous oxygen from the welding, cutting, and the bulk storage system used. It should comply with the provisions standard bulk oxygen system consumer site, the National Fire Protection Association 566, 1965, National Fire Protection Association. When oxygen cylinders are in use, being rubbed, and care must be taken to avoid dropping, knocking, or striking the cylinder. Heavy objects do not hold oxygen cylinders roughly. All cylinder oxygen leak valve safety fuse plug discs should be set with a side marked with a tension supplier. Do not tamper with the temp to repair the oxygen cylinder valves. Not use the hammer or wrench to open the valves. Before testing pressure regulators, open each oxygen cylinder valve for an instant to blow out the dirt or the foreign material of the nozzle. Wipe off the connection seat with a clean cloth. Do not stand in front of the valve when opening it. Warning, do not substitute oxygen with compressed air and pneumatic tools. Do not use oxygen to blow out pipelines, test radiators, purge tanks, or containers to dust clothing or work. J. Open oxygen cylinder valve slowly to prevent damage. Regulator high pressure gauge pressure for the regulator tension screw with the release of the before opening the valve. Not used cylinder valve should be closed with the protecting cap screw to prevent damage of valve. When oxygen cylinder is used, open the valve with it to fully limit and prevent leakage around the valve stem. Always use regulator oxygen cylinder to reduce the cylinder pressure to low working pressure. High cylinder pressure will burst the hose. Never interchange oxygen regulator hoses and other apparatus with similar equipment intended for the other gases. Alright, your MAPE gas cylinders. MAPE gas is a mixture with a stabilized methyl acetylene bromide. Stored liquid MAPE gas around 70 degrees Fahrenheit under the pressure of 94 psi gauge pressure. Repair any leaks in the MAPE gas vapors with the valve when the valve is open. It is difficult to detect visually. MAPE gas is of option as an obnoxious odor detected at 100 parts per million concentration, 1/340th of its lower explosive limit in the air. If repair the detected leaks impose limited no danger, however, if the leaks are ignored, a very high concentration, 5,000 parts per million or above, MAPE gas has an anesthetic effect. Proper clothing must be worn to prevent entry to personnel. Once released into the open air, the liquid MAPE gas boils at negative 386 degrees to negative 4 degrees Fahrenheit. This causes the frost-like burns when gas contacts the skin. MAPE gas toxicity is rated very slightly, high concentration, 5,000 parts per million, and may have an anesthetic effect. MAPE gases have some advantages and safety should be considered with the choosing of the process of the fuel gas, including the following. MAPE gas cylinders will detonate with a detonated drop or incinerated mass gas can be used for the safety of the full cylinder pressure 94 psi gauge. Liquid fuels insensitive to shock. Explosion limit of MAPE gas are low compared to acetylene. Leaks can be detected especially easily when a strong smell of MAPE gas. Alright, MAPE gas cylinders are easy to handle due to the light weight. You got your 210 fuel gas cylinders. All the most familiar with the fuel gas for the cutting, welding, acetylene, propane, natural gas, and propylene are used to store the fuel cylinders in specified well-ventilated areas outdoors in very vertical condition. Any cylinder must have the caps on it, and the cylinder either filled with empty should have the valve closed. Care must be taken to protect the valve with the damage, deterioration, major hazard, compressed gas, possibility, sudden relief of the gas from behind, removal, the breaking up of the valve, escape of the gas under the high pressure will cause the cylinder to act with a rocket, with the smashing of the people, the property, escaping the fuel gas can also be a fire explosion. Fire situation, special precautions should be taken with the acetylene cylinders. All acetylene shears equipped with one or more safety relief devices filled with a low melting point, fusible metal melts, and killing points of the water at 220 to 12 degrees Fahrenheit. Fire occurs on or near acetylene cylinders, but the fusible plug will melt. The escaping the acetylene will be ignited, will burn a roaring sound. Immediately evacuate all the people from the area with the difficult to put out with such fire. But the best action is to put water on the cylinder to keep it cool and keep all the acetylene cylinders in the area cool. Attempt to remove the burning cylinder with a close proximity of the other acetylene cylinder. Flammable hazard material from another combustible buildings best to allow for the gas to burn rather than to allow acetylene to escape the mist with the air as possible to explode. If the fire cylinder is a small flame around the hose connects to the valve stem with the fuse plug, try to pull out with the possible quickly. While wet glove, heavy cloth, or mud slapped on the flame will frequently extinguish. Mud slapped on the flame will frequently extinguish it through wetting the glove. The clothing will protect the person from approaching the cylinder, avoiding getting in line with the fusible plug, which might melt at any time. Alright, oxygen cylinders should be stored separate from the fuel gas cylinders, separately with the combustible materials. Stored cylinders in cool, well-ventilated areas. The temperature of the cylinder should never be allowed to be exceed 130 degrees Fahrenheit. When cylinders are empty, they should be marked empty, and the valves must be closed. Prohibit contamination from entering when the gas cylinder, even the regulator, is attached to the cylinder, should be secured, preventing falling means of chains and clamps. Your cylinder portable apparatus should be securely mounted with a specially designed cylinder truck. Cylinders should be handled with respect, but they should not be dropped and struck with the cylinder. Should never be used with a roller, hammers, wrenches, and not even open to the cylinder valve with fitted with the hand wheels. They should never be moved with electromagnetic cranes. There never be an electrical circuit so that the welding current can pass through them. Arc strike of the circuit will damage the cylinder, causing a possible fracture, requiring cylinder to condemn and discard them from the service. Alright, section 211, hoses. Do not allow the hose to come in contact with the oil, the grease, the penetrate, the deteriorate with the rubber constitute with the hazardous oxygen. All protected hoses will be marked to run over all the kinks and tangles. Do not leave the hose with any woman that can trip over them that can result in the personal energy damage, connection. Cylinders have been knocked over. Do not work with a hose over the shoulder, around the legs, and tied to the waist. Protect the hose with a hot slag and the flying spark with open flames. Do not force hose connections. Do not fit. Do not use white lead, oil, grease, or other pipe fitting compound with a connection with a hose torch or other equipment. Never crimp the hose to shut off the gas. Examine all hoses periodically leaks and by immersing in water while under the pressure. Do not use matches to check for leaks and settling hose repair leaks with the cutting of the hose and insert the brass splice. Do not use a tape for bending. Replace the hoses if necessary. Make sure that the hose is secured attached with the torch and regulator before using. Never do not use new stored hose lengths without first blowing out with them with a compressor air to eliminate talc and all accumulated foreign material otherwise that either clog the torch parts. Only approved gas flooding, gas hoses, flaming, cutting of the welding should be used with the flaxing fuel gas equipment. Single and double vac, well canalized, double multiple strand lines are available. Sizes of hose should be matched with the connector, regulators, and torch. In the United States, the color green is used for oxygen, red for acetylene with the fuel gas, and black for an air and compressed gas. The air and international standards color for the blue and oxygen, and orange for fuel gas. Alright, connection hose with the right hand with the in air gases, oxygen, and left hand for fuel gases. Nut with the fuel gases hoses with the identified groove machine in the center of the nuts. Hose should be periodically inspected and burns for the worn pieces of black with the connection that must be kept with good repairs no longer than necessary. See how much longer we got this. Just scrolling. We didn't get a table of contents for this shit. Alright, chapter 3 will be at page 66. We're going to cut the tape there, and we'll come back. So, Section 3, Safety Arc Welding and Cutting. Testing.